Nowadays, nothing really excites me. Only one of me and nobody's like me. Phone ringing and I tell him it's ice. I got wifey on bling and she icy. Freeze, photo, please, no photos. No, G's, no, please, no photos. Hit the door and the dome and just whole team here might need some. Still young, but I move like a veteran. New deal to my lawyer to if it down in my management. I'm just warming up, wait till I old producer saw the numbers one. Different colors in my baggy light. Chalk it up, talk of the town when you're talking up. Wanna get you a ring and you tough enough. Wanna get you new things when your pockets dull. Run it up. I used to be quiet and out of luck. Now I move up and move humble cause the hate and the jealousy. My mama telling me count up your blessings and run it up. Nowadays nothing really excites me. Only one of me and nobody's like me. Phone ringing and I tell him it's ice. I got wifey on bling and she icy. Freeze, photo, please, no photos. No, G's, no, please, no photos. I keep giving game away. I put game on layaway. I got paid to play today. I get paid to stay away. I get paid on rainy days. I might make it rain today. I got paid off pain today. Thought it'd take the pain away. In my own lane, finger roll. I would never sell my only soul. Heard your whole team was for sale. Heard it's on the market for the low. Who the realest, we might never know. All this acting, you gon' play a role. Give you the world when they sign you up. Try you out and then they line you up. Ooh, now you're looking hungry, ribs are touching, need some food. Now you're all on live acting surprised, but you was fooled. Boy, get out the way, it's been a day, now you're old news. Now you got the pen and pad, you're trying to take my moves. Nowadays, nothing really excites me. Only one of me and nobody's like me. Phone ringing and I tell him it's icy. I got wifey on bling and she icy. Freeze, photo, please, no photos. No, G's, no, please, no photos. Nowadays, nothing really excites me. Only one of me and nobody's like me. Phone ringing and I tell him it's icy. I got wifey on bling and she icy. Freeze, photo, please, no photos. No, G's, no, please, no photos.
About me
I'm thinking back on all those times when I felt closed off from all that I could become, eager but too scared to climb. Wanted to please my friends, but it felt like the end of myself. I was shut down and all drained out. I was lost, so I had to change. Yeah, I shook off all the bad vibes, cut me loose from the pettiness they turned on me. But now I am perfectly free to be me. This is who I am. This is who I am now. No matter what they saying, this is who I am. This is who I am now. They think that I have lost my mind, that I'm not being true, but they don't have a clue. 'Cause this is me when I cut out all of the shallowness and everything I suppress to fit in a small frame. But I won't play your game anymore, so I had to change. Yeah, I shook off all the bad vibes, cut me loose from the pettiness they turned on me. But now I am perfectly free to be me. This is who I am. This is who I am now. No matter what they saying, this is who I am. This is who I am now. I'm gonna let them talk, but I ain't following nobody else. How can I be resentful when I finally respect myself? I shook off all the bad vibes, cut me loose from the pettiness they turned on me. But now I am perfectly free to be me. This is who I am. This is who I am now. No matter what they're saying, this is who I am. This is who I am now.
Howdy. My name is Wanzer-Serrano. You probably know that because you probably found out about this live stream from me in some way. I am a associate professor of communication at Texas A&M University, and what I'd like to do today is talk a bit about what it's kind of been like teaching fully online for a full semester in the middle of a pandemic. So I've kind of titled this Pandemic Pedagogy Recap, kind of a debrief on the semester. What I'd like to do is talk a bit about what I thought, things that I thought worked well, things that were maybe a bit more challenging for me, because I think that that the experience that I have, that I had this semester, are probably shared by others, and I think taking this opportunity to talk about them and you taking an opportunity to kind of hear about them and perhaps even to ask me some questions will kind of shed new light on your own experiences now and moving into the next semester, which is still basically going to be online. That's the kind of that's the basic plan for today. That's what I'm up to. Hey, an old friend is here today. Pinar, thank you for joining. Hi, it's great to see you. Any questions that you have, feel free to just drop those in the live chat to the right of the viewing window, and I can throw them up on the screen and answer them as we go along, or in a kind of Q&A section that I'll have later too. But please don't hold back. Ask your question, and I'll do what I can. I mentioned before that I'm a professor in communication. I also teach and do research in Latino studies and Latinx studies. And approaching this semester, was definitely like a challenge from the get-go for me, as I'm sure it was for everyone, right? Anyone who's not used to teaching remotely or teaching online faced lots of different questions and challenges heading into the semester. Adding to those for me was I was starting at a new institution. So I made a move to Texas A&M University over the summer. So here I was starting at a new place with students I've basically never interacted with before, teaching courses that were new to me. And doing it all remotely, which means, missing out on a lot of the opportunities that we typically have and I think take for granted when we've been trained for and all of our experience has been in face-to-face instruction. And so that made it a particularly weird semester for me, just as it was a weird semester for the students. And one of the things that I found was really kind of important all along is just to kind of be ready to step back and acknowledge that, like, this is all strange. It's a weird time. Nothing is as we expect it to be. There's all sorts of different challenges that come along. And I think with that in mind, I think one of the, with that being the kind of like key thing that I kind of entered each day with for teaching, it meant that I also needed to take to kind of like give some kind of special consideration to all of the different sorts of challenges that my students were facing across the year, right? Like, now's not the time to be all like super skeptical about students' excuses, right? It's just not. Like, you kind of have to like be willing to take people at their word, especially when the world is kind of falling apart in different ways. So what I'd like to do with that in mind here is I want to start today actually with a bit of a kind of technological overview to show you kind of what I've been working with in approaching kind of the online teaching environment. And that for me starts just with the physical equipment that I use for all of my instruction. This is obviously, I think obviously not a webcam coming straight out of my computer. It is instead a mirrorless DSLR camera. And what I'm trying to do here is pull up a little my iPhone to give you a little tour of my office, to show you what I'm using and what's going on here. So if this connection works, yeah, there we go. So this is my setup, and I'm going to step away here for a second and not just show you my microphone. So you may not hear me too well, although I will kind of swing the mic over. So I'm running a kind of like, two external monitors set up with my, got a little freeze in the video there. Oh no, a glitch in the matrix. Okay, there we go. So two external monitors with my laptop, very low tech, stacked up on some books. And then I've got my camera up above with a ring light, kind of looking through the ring light. And then I've got additional lighting on either side of me helping to keep me lit. And switching back to my default view here. I'm wearing my headphones now. Sometimes I just have some speakers, but always best to kind of work with headphones to help minimize potential problems that come with not using them. So I use a Canon M50 mirrorless camera, so not a DSLR, but a mirrorless camera with a Sigma 16 millimeter f1.4 lens on it. And so that's, and links to kind of both those things are down in the description below. But that's what gives me that's what gives me this kind of like nice focus on me, especially with the lighting, a blurry background, right? You can't even tell really what's written on my board behind me. And it just gives a more kind of refined appearance for whatever you're doing. Now, this is a kind of like typical live streamer setup, and the nice thing about that is that I think a lot of our students are used to watching streamers on YouTube and on Twitch, and this is the kind of aesthetic that they're getting in those settings. They're not so used to getting that in their educational settings, and so like consistently across the semester, students commented on the production value of my class because I have essentially a good lens and camera, appropriate lighting, a good microphone. So this is an Electro Voice RE20, a kind of classic broadcast microphone. If you've ever spent time in a radio station, chances are you've used one of these. I have it for podcasting. It works great for video too. So this is the kind of like, this is like the foundation of the physical technological setup that I use. And I'm using that for everything. I run this through Zoom for faculty meetings and student meetings, unless I'm somewhere else. And I use this for all of my online teaching, whether that's through Zoom or through something else. And I'll get back to that here in just a second. The other thing that I do is I have everything kind of running through something called Ecamm. And so here's a little demo. This is the screen that I see for Ecamm, where I've got the kind of like what's being streamed or recorded here. I've got overlays, scenes, sound effects, music, data about streaming down here, and the comments over here. And this software lets me do things like, put Pinar's comment up here. Hi, Daryl. Hi, Pinar. And it allows me to just kind of like have access to all of that stuff in one place and make for a pretty fluid streaming experience. The other thing that I use, the way that I'm like switching through these different views and everything, is I've got it's not going to come into focus. This is called a Stream Deck. It's basically got a bunch of buttons that are linked up to scenes and overlays and stuff like that allows me to kind of, ideally without even looking, to be able to go through and like, change the scenes. For example, I wanted to mention that you can find out more about Ecamm and download a free trial. And you can find that link in the description down below. So I can do things like that, right, just with the push of a button because all that's set up in advance for me. That stuff seems small, but I have found that it kind of, it seems maybe it's a little flashier than I think a lot of professors are used to. I have found it to be to just kind of like add to the experience for the students in ways that make it a little less tedious to kind of come to class in the online environment. The other thing that I do is like I'm not afraid to get a little bit goofy and stuff. So especially for my large lecture class this semester, which I ran through YouTube as a live stream, I would do sound effects. So we can have a DJ air horn. That may have scared you if you're listening to this with the volume up. Applause, and my favorite, the sad trombone, because, sad trombone. So, being able to have those sound effects has been helpful in things like, chat and Q&A with the students. And so, all that adds up to something that makes it a much different experience than teaching in person. but one that that I also had a lot of fun with, especially in that large lecture setting. So this semester I taught three different. I taught an overload, so I taught three classes, and they were all taught pretty significantly different ways. So one class was an asynchronous, kind of fully asynchronous with set deadlines, public speaking course. One was a kind of senior level intensive writing course that I taught synchronously through Zoom, and the last was a kind of junior level kind of foundations theory course that I taught as a live stream through YouTube. Now there's advantages and disadvantages to each of these formats, and I want to talk a bit about some of the kind of like synchronous versus asynchronous and which platform and what the advantages and disadvantages of each platform were in my experience this semester right now. So I think the most, in some ways, the most challenging course to teach was the asynchronous public speaking course. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that this was a kind of like ready, set, go course that was designed by someone else, and that I was kind of just teaching. Now, just teaching something is presents some significant challenges if you haven't developed all the material and kind of have a deep knowledge of the ins and outs of the course. So it's not for the faint of heart. The kind of biggest challenge that I saw of the asynchronous course is I think that students had a hard time kind of pacing themselves, even though we did structural things. So if you've used Canvas or any LMS, you know that you can basically like do things like only release certain modules on certain dates, right? Or only release them after they've completed the module before, right? And so you can do things to help kind of keep them pacing along. The problem is that I think there's a couple of problems though. It's hard. Sometimes it can be hard to kind of accurately pace things within a module, even when you label things clearly and put them in an order for them to follow. And I think, part of this is also sometimes it's just kind of the nature of certain people to skip stuff and go to like the assignment, right? And so you end up with problems like people don't understand how to do an assignment because they've gone to the assignment and expect everything to be on the assignment page. But the problem is that assignment page is crafted in a way that that expects the student to have actually like read the chapter in the textbook or have watched a video that came before it, right? And so you need to be really clear about the expectations and steps and walk people along that way, especially in the printed material that appears online. I think that probably a third of my students, consistently a third of my students, wouldn't read the announcement posts, or especially wouldn't watch the kind of weekly videos that I would post. So like every week I would post an overview video at the beginning of the week that said, hey, here's what you did last week and what worked well and didn't work well. Here's what's coming up this week. Here's the instructional stuff you need to pay attention to. Here are the deadlines that you need to pay attention to. And just like lay it all out there, right? Which is a really important best practice. Like if you're doing an asynchronous course that is paced with assignment due dates and stuff, like do that check-in every week so that students have that face time with you. The problem is that when a third of the class isn't actually watching the videos, and I think probably isn't kind of reading the announcements either, then if it's not in the material that is built into your LMS, like Canvas, if it's not in those pages, in those assignment descriptions, then a third of the class just isn't going to get it. Okay, so it's important to kind of to make those adjustments as needed to make sure that what's in the LMS is kind of reflects the things that you're adding in those videos as well. So really challenging, I think, to do the fully asynchronous course. I think it was, it's a class that was mostly first year students. I think that made it especially weird for them. Um, but but it is what it is, right? And sometimes asynchronous is the best way to go, or is what we need to do, given various circumstances and demands of students and institutions. My other two classes, as I mentioned, were taught synchronously, but taught using different platforms. So my 400 level class, my senior level class, I taught via Zoom. It met Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Usually Fridays were workshops, and Mondays and Wednesdays were kind of instructional days, where they had a reading and I'd lecture for a bit, or we'd have discussion over that reading. Zoom works great for that. I think and this is a question that came in before I started the live stream from a friend of mine, who asked, about the kind of best practices for building spaces of trust, and to help cultivate good discussions. So, I think the first thing to kind of like recognize about that when you're working like a Zoom, small class kind of environment, is that online is way different from in person, right? Like it's pretty easy to get a discussion going in a face-to-face class. If nothing else, you can have people count off by the numbers 1 through 4, put them into groups, and they're going to like talk to each other in those groups because they're there, right? It's kind of their presence is unavoidable, and across time, right? Seeing each other on a day-to-day basis, they are going to develop a level of trust with each other and with you that is in some ways kind of automatic. There's obviously things that you can do that we all know to help build that more. But at a certain level, like the default is to kind of like lean toward that, I think. In an online environment though, I think there's some challenges here. Like one of the big challenges that I faced was people just didn't want to turn on their cameras. And so, the first day of class, like everyone turned on their cameras and that was all nice and stuff. But then it seemed like every couple of days, like someone else would kind of drop out. Right. And you get to a certain point, and I think a lot of people I've talked to experience this semester. You get to a certain point where like everyone has their camera turned off. And so as the instructor, you're just kind of staring into a blank void. They're just kind of, if they have it set up to just see everyone, they're essentially staring into a blank void, right? Unless they just have your window kind of maximized. And I think that ends up even carrying into like breakout discussions that you set up, right? People are reluctant to turn their cameras on in those settings as well. And all of that does have a kind of like, a negative impact on class discussion, I think. Now, on the one hand, I think there are some very good reasons to, someone might want to have their camera turned off, especially when people are, taking these classes from environments that aren't really set up to be doing online education, right? They're not like in an office or in a dorm room even sometimes. They're maybe at home, right, with kids and stuff running around. And so, I think there are some good reasons why people might not want to have that turned on. I think there's also a lot of bad reasons why people don't turn on their camera, though, right? Like they just don't want to because they're just getting up and, their lives are working. They're letting their lives kind of move to a different schedule since they don't have to actually be someplace. And so I think that kind of two things that I would encourage next semester for people. One is I would just kind of encourage people to have their cameras on. Now, I think it's a mistake to require people to turn their cameras on, especially when we're still dealing with dealing with pandemic pedagogy, right? These, for the most part, aren't students who have opted into an online educational environment. They are not prepared to be doing that. And so I think it's a lot to kind of require them to do so. But I think that we can strongly encourage it, and we can offer the reasons why, right? So, I had students toward the end of the semester start turning their cameras on because it just was all getting too weird and unaccountable for them, right? And so they wanted that accountability. They wanted to be able to have that kind of that simulated face-to-face conversation. And so I think sharing those kinds of experiences with your students next semester helps to justify this request to, if possible, have cameras turned on. The other thing that you can do, though, and I think it is fair to require, is to require avatars in Zoom, right? So you can save a photo, and it can be a real photo of you, right? Or it can be a drawing or some other kind of, approximation or representation of who you are. Requiring those avatars at least ensures that no one is staring at the blank screen, right, with just the little shadow figures on it. That at least there's some nugget of who people are, even when their cameras are turned off. And I think that's a suggestion that came from the same friend who asked about discussion, and that's an awesome. I think that's a really worthwhile requirement for a Zoom-based class. The other thing I think you can do to help foster these discussions, though, is think about the different places you're having discussions, right? So the nice thing about the kind of online environment is discussions don't have to only take place in class time. Sure, you can do the breakout rooms in Zoom and have people go off and discuss things, and I think that works great for workshops, especially, and things that you've given them a really precise targeted task. But there's also all the LMSs out there have discussion forums, right? And so you can assign discussions as a way to get people engaging one another outside of the classroom and in response to a particular prompt. The classic model, right, is write a post and then reply to two of your peers in a substantive way. The more specific you can be in terms of your prompt and your expectations for the initial post and people's replies, the better kind of engagement in discussion you're going to get. The other thing that I really strongly recommend about online discussion is don't just have one big discussion for the whole class. Break people up into groups. And so I'll show you over here this is Canvas. This is my institution's installation of Canvas. And if you go into the People tab here, so if you go into People, this is a practice course. There's nothing that's going to reveal the identity of students or anything like that here. Go over to groups, and you can create a group set, right? And so I might call this discussions. I am sure that self-sign-up works in some installations of this. Neither I nor my students can figure out how to get it to work in my institution's installation of Canvas. So it may just not fully be turned on yet here because we're rolling out Canvas Fresh. But what you can do is you can have it just kind of automatically split your class up into 5 groups or whatever. Let's say you have 25 students, 5 groups of 5. That works. And basically you set that up, you click save, and it's going to, let's see. So it creates my 5 groups. There's no students actually put in these groups because this is a test installation of a test course, a practice course. But it would populate those with 5 students. And then when you go to create discussions, and you create a new discussion and you give it, you title it whatever you want. When you get down here, let me zoom in for you to see this. When you get down into options, first of all, you want to allow threaded replies. You say users must post before seeing replies, right? So that way everyone's posting their initial contribution with fresh, right? Not being influenced by their peers. And then you say that it's graded. And when you do that, it asks if this is a group discussion, and it is, and you choose the discussion group. Okay. And that's going to ensure that people are just posting and replying within their groups. And the advantage of that, to go back to the original question about building spaces of trust, is that those 5 people develop a rapport with one another, much like people would in that kind of face-to-face environment. And so, especially with things like writing workshops, this is, it's really important to have that trust developed and cultivated over the course of that term, so that people are honest in the kinds of feedback that they're giving their peers. So that's one of my favorite ways of doing that. So I did that for my large lecture course, where they had weekly discussions. It was smaller. It was groups of like 10 or so for those discussions. And that was, that helped to kind of develop that rapport and give people that familiarity with each other over the course of the semester. Pinar, you have asked quite a question. So I don't know that I have a great answer to that question, to be perfectly honest. I think that that public speaking needs a public, and the best the way that we did that in our online version of the course is to have peer review assignments. So after a student submits their speech, they post the video into essentially a discussion, and then they, two peers would offer a kind of peer evaluation of the speech. And so that's where, it's a kind of an asynchronous public. In terms of practicing public speaking, I think that, when I've taught public speaking in face-to-face environments, it's the speaking days are so valuable because they are really an opportunity for everyone to hear, a wide breadth of people speaking from different experience levels and different experiences in life. And there's so much that is gained from that, and especially also from the debriefing at the end, right? People have an opportunity to kind of like quickly do their own self-criticism. Like, I thought X would be easier, but it was actually pretty hard. And that helps people immediately, right? And I'm able as a teacher to be able to say, okay, here's what I really liked in this day. Here's what I think could use some improvement. Without singling out any particular student, I can point to trends, and then that's helpful, right? So I would still do some of that in my video recap. So after I'd finished watching the speeches, I would do a longer weekly video where I would identify like the things that I thought people did really well and the things that I thought people could work on. So that's one way that I address that challenge. The other way is the way that we have it set up here, the kind of like plug and play version of the course, is with what we call connect assignments. And so these are in those small groups, right? The like 5-person groups, 4-person groups. and they're very short speeches. And they work the same way as a discussion, right? So it's like you do your initial post, which is the video of your speech, like a 2-minute speech or whatever, and then you reply to 2 of your peers. And so early in the semester, I'd comment more heavily on that, and then later in the semester, it's just the students commenting on it. I think that became a kind of key mode of practice. And so, it's really kind of the combination of the videos that I would do evaluating things after the round of speeches was over, the peer evaluations of those speeches that students are doing with each other, the self-evaluations that students do of their major speeches, and then the kind of like regular practice of these little mini speeches. If I'm being honest, my hesitation about what I just explained is that's a lot of work for the students and for the instructor, and so it's I think a challenging workload. And if I was doing it again, I'd probably remove some of the assignments. Maybe. It's kind of hard to remove one of the major assignments, but I'd remove some stuff to kind of like lighten the load of the fully online environment a little bit, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does. So the last class I want to talk about is my large lecture class, because that's the one I had kind of the most fun doing. Not that my smaller classes weren't fun. It's just, it got to being totally honest. It gets to a certain point, I think, and a lot of us experience this and deal with it in different ways, where especially if you're just using the Zoom and people don't have their videos turned on, it just gets a little bit soul crushing. It's like showing up to teach a classroom and no one's there, which, by the way, I know people have been doing this year because their institutions have required, right, the kind of like a forced high flex model. And when no one shows up, they're literally lecturing to an empty room with people online, also with their videos turned off online. So you would think then that just like doing lecture as a live stream would be equally kind of soul crushing, but being perfectly honest, it was not. It was a lot of fun. And I think part of the reason for that, I alluded to this earlier, is just that students are used to engaging people in these online environments built around streaming. They're used to typing in the chat. They're used to commenting. There's a certain kind of like a mode of playfulness that operates in that environment. And so, I can do goofy things like have Fun Shirt Fridays, right? Where I like wear, I know it's not Friday, but where I wear, I wear my normal kind of work clothes Monday and Wednesday for lecture. And then for Friday discussions, I would wear a fun shirt, right? A t-shirt with some kind of print on it. That I can use, I can use sound effects, right? So if I'm asking for feedback from people for answers to a question in chat, if people get it wrong, I can give them the buzzer. And if people get it right, yeah. And if everyone gets it wrong, then it's the sad trombone, right? And so I can do those kinds of goofy things. I can do, on Fridays, I can play this.
It's Friday.
Or at the end of the semester, I can play a little clip from Europe's hit, The Final Countdown.
It's the final countdown.
Or, I can create a mashup, Final Friday. I'm not going to play the whole thing for you. But doing those kinds of like, sort of silly, goofy things, right, that kind of like work in a live streaming environment and that people can have fun with, that makes for a certain liveliness in those settings. And so I I would do my classes in the same ways that I did this live stream. I'd start out with the countdown timer, 10 minutes before class started, with music that I'd switch up from week to week. And so there were like the core group of folks who would show up early for the dance party. And then I'd get into it. And so I have, different overlays built for being able to have my lecture on screen and have a bigger version of myself. So I'd maybe, take up one side of the, a quarter of the side of the screen, and then the slides are everywhere else. Students ask questions. I'm able to pop them up on the screen as an overlay. I can set timers and have visible timers on the screen. So if I want to set a 10-minute timer, I can pop it up on the screen, right there, and make it bigger, and like change the color of it and stuff to make it stand out a little bit more, and all of that. Helps to kind of like create layers of interactivity that don't rely on the students having their video cameras on. Because let's face it, in a large lecture class, there's oftentimes minimal engagement from the students in the auditorium anyway. Right. And so, and it doesn't really rely on having to kind of like being, 5 feet away from them either. And so being able to kind of move questions to the chat and just being able to kind of do lecture, answer questions as they come in, put up timers, I'll get rid of this timer now. All of that made for, I feel like, a fairly dynamic environment, and being able to do so in a way that kind of also like use some other technological solutions like a good camera and lighting, and a microphone that people can hear, like all that made for what the students called high production value, right? Which made it more engaging, entertaining, and stuff like that. Now, it still was a kind of like rhetorical theory course, but I think that it worked a lot better, I think, than it would have had I used Zoom, where I can't do the comment overlays and stuff like that. So I really like that, and I've actually it's got me kind of wondering in a post-COVID world, the degree to which it might even make sense to do a lecture discussion class where Monday, Wednesday lectures are on YouTube as live streams that are accessible only to the students, and then discussions are in person with TAs on Fridays. I didn't have TAs this semester, and so I did lecture Monday, Wednesday via YouTube, and then Friday. First half of the semester, I did Fridays as discussion on Zoom. Once football season started, though, and attendance really dropped off on Fridays, I switched that back over to YouTube, and just did, kind of got questions from the discussion questions to kind of kick things off, took questions live during class, and really used it as a Q&A session more so than probably a discussion section. So that's, I think that's all that I have planned to talk about. I know there's a few of you watching live right now. If you have questions, comments, anything you want to kind of add, feel free to kind of type that into chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts or your questions. I could just, play some music while you're doing that. The one kind of weird thing operating in YouTube for instruction in particular is that there is like some latency, right? The nice thing about Zoom is it is fairly instantaneous, but depending on someone's internet connection or whatever, even though I have things set as an ultra low latency kind of manner, and there's only like a 3 or 4 second delay between what I'm doing and what's actually showing up on your screen theoretically, in practice for people, it ends up being sometimes a 10, 15, sometimes even 30-second delay. So I've gotten used to doing a little countdown timer where it's like, here's my 30-second timer, over on the side, and I'll just kind of leave that up there and chat about something while I'm waiting for people to type in their questions. And if there aren't any, then I bid you farewell. So all in all, I think that like I started off saying, it's just a very weird semester in some important ways, and especially when I don't know these students. That makes it kind of extra hard to kind of like just be working with them in this fully online environment. But I think that the good learning did take place, even though I think that probably better learning could have taken place with some alterations. So all that said, next semester for me, I'm teaching a graduate course. It'll be on Zoom. Be sure to have breaks, right? You can't do a 3-hour Zoom session, even though I think administrators probably love to do that. At least judging by some meetings I've been in. So it's important to, if you have those long classes, those 2.5, 3-hour classes, to add a break and give people a chance to kind of like get off the screen and, step away and walk around and do whatever. I think that, I'm hopeful that we'll return in person, in part just so that I can, big part so I can just get to know my students. But it hasn't been the disaster that I think that I think I was partly expecting in some ways, and I think that some students were expecting too. Oh, the one final thing I do want to say is a pitch to kind of like talk to your learning designers at your university. I think at this point in time, most, if not all, universities have some learning designers who are available, who are more than happy to talk with you and share some of their expertise with you. And the other thing is, you can also do some of that sort of on your own. One organization that I took a course from on the recommendation of one of those learning designers of Pinar, actually, was through Quality Matters. So they're a kind of like, accreditation and rubric based system and organization. I'm like explaining it poorly. But basically they develop a set of best practices for online learning. And you can take their courses where not only do you learn about those different best practices, but through their courses, you're experiencing those best practices in practice, which is I think really helpful, right? I think it's one thing to kind of like read the books and learn that stuff. It's another thing to actually do it and to have that kind of student experience doing it. And to me, it was really valuable doing their kind of learning the QM, the Quality Matters rubric before, over the summer before this semester started, because I was able to put that stuff into practice in developing and designing my own courses. Now, did I do it perfectly? Absolutely not. Especially with 3 preps, all of which were kind of new for me. There's a lot that didn't get done at the beginning of the semester that I wanted to have done. But by the time we kind of got into a rhythm in the semester, then I was able to have that stuff up and to have my Canvas page designed in a way that kind of, I think, met the spirit, if not the letter, of Quality Matters. And I think that's part of what helps students really kind of like stay on track and have an accessible experience in your course. So So I'll leave it at that. Since there's no other questions, I'll just say to kind of close things off. If you haven't already, go ahead and like my page on Facebook. I'm facebook.com/DrDWS. That's also what I am on Twitter, so you can do the same thing there. And while you're here on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that ring that bell for notifications so that you get an alert the next time I'm going to be going live. Yeah, no problem. Happy to do so. I've done so publicly before, but I will do so again. Thank you, Pinar, for all that you've taught me, over the last year, I guess year and a half now that we've been that we've worked together, and I learned so much last year from you and Shelby and the kind of the I'm blanking on the name of the program right now, but the program that I was in at Iowa was a truly transformative experience for me. But so if you have other questions, though, feel free to drop them in the comments down below, or reach out to me in some other manner, and I'll do my best to answer them. But that's it. I hope the semester finishes off well for people, and that next semester is even better. So that's it. Take care, and happy holidays to everyone. Bye.